Hello, a very warm welcome to you, and a very warm welcome to you to this first AWS introductory course. So this is the first time I'm presenting the AWS introductory course. So we'll start with what is cloud computing. Cloud computing basically involves on-demand delivery of IT resources. Right? So whenever you need any resources, you can leverage the cloud to spin off any servers or any services that you possibly need. It is based on the pay-as-you-go pricing model, right? So as you use the resources, you pay as you go, right? Usually you'll be billed on a monthly basis, right? It's elastic, scalable, and cost efficient. So the whole idea here is the elastic part of it is very interesting. If you're a company who is seasonal in nature, you may want to consider this, right? Because the thing is, like, for example, if you're in the retail business, we know that the last quarter seems to be the one where you do the most amount of business, and maybe that's when you need the web servers the most for your customers, right? So it is a good chance that you'll be using a lot more resources in the last quarter of the year than you use in the first or second quarter of the year, right? So this way you can scale your resources as need be. So you can scale up or scale down as need be. And this is what makes it cost efficient. So you don't have to buy all the hardware ahead of time and have this hardware sitting around for 9 months when you really need to use it for the last 3 months, right? And there is a shared responsibility model. So we will talk about shared responsibility a little bit later, right? So this is what the cloud entails. So instead of trying to spend money to create data centers, what you can do instead is to leverage the cloud. So this is becoming more and more popular with many companies, be it in the United States, be it in Canada, which is where I am, or be it in other parts of the world. Hopefully the same adoption is taking place, right? So AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, is a world-leading cloud platform. They were there well before Microsoft started with their Azure, but Microsoft has done very, very well and caught up a lot with the AWS. So those two happen to be the two main platforms. Then, of course, the others as well, like Google Cloud, right? There's Oracle as well. So there are a few other players, but basically AWS and Microsoft Azure are the two biggest ones right now. AWS has 200 plus fully featured services, and they have data centers across global regions and availability zones. We'll talk about availability zones in just a moment. And customers are all over the map, being, starting from startups, enterprises, and governments. You can imagine they've been there for quite a while. So they have customers all over the world in all different sectors, and so has Microsoft as well. I'll have another course on Microsoft Azure as well. The benefits of AWS is scalability and flexibility, right? It's very scalable, it's very flexible. You can deploy resources anywhere around the world with its global reach. It's highly reliable and highly available, right? So they have multiple data centers in each region. So, and I'll show you how that map looks like. And you'll see that they are very, very well equipped to give you high reliability and high availability. As I mentioned, this global reach as well. So they are in all different parts of the world. We'll have a look at the map shortly. And of course, the security and compliance is of importance. So they do abide by security and compliance. And their cost is very interesting as well, right? So they're highly cost optimized as well. So their resources are very, very efficiently laid out and priced as well. In terms of the global infrastructure, they do cover zones or regions all over the world. In each region, most of the regions have multiple available zones, and they have edge locations as well. So edge locations are basically locations whereby you can stream information from, like how Netflix does, for example, right? They have a highly fault tolerant design, right, to ensure that your service is up and running as much as possible. and they have a global backbone network that belongs to them only, which they can support clients. Now, of course, one thing we have to realize that they have two backbone networks, one for the public sector for us, for companies, or private and public sectors, and one for government. The government one is totally separate from the private and public, which is obviously important for security reasons, right? Now let's try and understand the word availability zones, because AWS has availability zones all over the world. They have regions. Each region has availability zone. So what do we imply by the word availability zone? Availability zones basically are physically separate sets of data centers within an AWS region. So if there's a region, AWS region, and we look at the regions, if you have an AWS region, each region or most of the regions should have multiple availability zones. Like in this case, I'm showing an example where you have 3 availability zones. Each and every available zone comprises of multiple data centers. Now, in certain cases, there may be only one data center. AWS seems to be more kind of inclined to have at least 2 data centers in each available zone. I've seen Microsoft, there are certain instances whereby you may see only one data center in one of the locations, in one of the available zones, because it's all supported by multiple available zones. So you're still fine. So the whole idea is your resources are sitting in here in an availability zone, and then in multiple availability zones. The whole idea is to stagger your resources across multiple availability zones so that if something goes down, then you're still fine, right? So that's the important part. So availability zones basically are physically separate sets of data centers. As you see, the sets of data centers, it could be 2 or 3 data centers typically within one availability zone, right? And each region could have 3 availability zones, sometimes 4 or 5, depending on where you are. I've even seen 6 availability zones, right? And each availability zone basically comprises of 2 or more data centers equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking. So the whole idea is to ensure resilience of the network, right? And its high availability, right? To give you the highest possible availability, to make sure that it has multiple power sources, it is cool, and the cooling is there in place, right? There's networking in place so that multiple connections are available in case something happens to any part of the network. So an availability zone basically is set up to be an isolation boundary. So the whole idea is that if one zone goes down, then the other zone continues operating or working away. These availability zones are connected through high-speed networks, which are based on fiber optics. And the number of available zones vary per region. Now let's have a look over here in the next slide. So you can see this is a global map of the AWS infrastructure, right? So you can see there is one here, US West, for example, is US East. There is one in Canada, planned in Canada over here. There's another one in Canada over here as well. There is one in South America. There's quite a few in Europe. There is one here in the Middle East, a couple of Middle East over here, right? And then there is in India and so on and so forth, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, China, and Japan, right? So we can see they have regions all over the world. There's one in New Zealand as well over here, which is being planned, right? So this is the AWS Global Infrastructure Map showing you all the different regions that they support. Within North America specifically, you have the North American region in which you have US West, which is the Oregon region. Then there is the US East, which is North Virginia. And then you have the US West, which is Northern California. You have US East, which is the Ohio region. And then there's Canada Central, and there's a government cloud as well, which is for government only over here. Now you do see that the number of available zones are different in different regions. US West has 4, the US East has 6, US West to Northern California has 3, and Ohio has 3, and Central Canada has 3, right? And the government location. So you can see the different number of available zones, but you can see mostly there are 3 available zones in each region or more, which is great, right? So this ensures that your systems will be highly available. Now, when we talk about AWS, AWS offers different types of services, and they can be categorized accordingly. So we'll see different sorts of services offered by AWS. There is the AWS Compute Service, which is the Amazon EC2, which is the Elastic Computing or Elastic Cloud Computing Services, which is where you can build virtual servers, be it Windows servers, could be Linux servers, could be Windows servers. I mean, in the sense that it could be Windows servers 2019, 2022, could be Windows Workstation, and so on and so forth. So you can build virtual machines in here. If you decide not to build virtual machines, you can subscribe to AWS Lambda services, which is basically they'll offer you the service of serverless compute. There's also Elastic Beanstalk for managed applications, and you have containers in Kubernetes as well available for running your applications. Then there is storage services. The most common one you'll probably end up using is the Amazon S3, simple storage services. And then there's the EBS block storage, file storage, and the Glacier, which is more for archival reasons, right? You want to have something backed up and stored away in archival for future utilization in long-term storage. Then there is the networking services, right? So the Amazon virtual, what is called virtual private cloud is what they call it. Those are isolated networks that you'll create within your Amazon subscription. And then you have CloudFront, you have the DNS and domains available. There's the Elastic Load Balancer for traffic distribution as well. Then you have database services. So you technically build a database on your virtual machine that you build in AWS, or you can decide, hey, I don't want to go through the trouble of building my own database, my own SQL server, or my own Oracle server. Then you can subscribe to their services for databases. There is the RDS relational database available, DynamoDB, Aurora, and Redshift. Now, as far as security and identity is concerned, you have the IAM, which is the Identity and Access Management. That's what you'll use to create users in your environment. Basically, put them into certain groups and give them certain permissions. You can use key management service for encrypting information that is there either at rest or in transit. And then you have the idea behind organizations, which is multi-account governance. So if you have multiple accounts that you're dealing with, you can do it there as well. So you can see basically all the different services that AWS offers you. So we'll learn more and more details as we go along. There'll be some we use more often than not, obviously, right? Which are more popular, and that's what most companies need. Before we go ahead, it's interesting, before we go on to one more service that it offers, let's look at the breakdown of responsibility across multiple infrastructure types. Now, you may have been used to on-premise deployments, right? If you're new to the cloud, that's what probably you have been used to. In here, you can see all these different services, starting from the server hardware, storage hardware, networking, virtualization, operating system, the database security, and application code, all is under your umbrella or your responsibility, which is in blue. So anything in blue is your responsibility. So on-premise, everything becomes your responsibility. So you're going to set up the data center, put the server hardware in there, storage hardware, build the networking, right? build the virtualization infrastructure, be it VMware, be it Hyper-V, be it Zen Server, right? You'll have your own operating system, your licensing, and everything else. Now, in the cloud platform, you can decide to choose 3 different options. The most common you'll find is infrastructure as a code. This is IaaS, which is infrastructure as a code, in which basically the cloud provider, in which in this case is AWS, AWS will give you the server hardware, the storage hardware. They'll take care of the networking and the virtualization piece. So now you can use their hardware or their infrastructure, to be exact, because this is infrastructure as a service, to build your operating system. So now you can install Windows operating system onto their machines. Now you can subscribe to whether you want 2 CPUs, 4 CPUs, 8 CPUs, whatever you want, you can get and install your own operating system, be it Windows or be it Linux. Install your own database software, and you'll be responsible for securing your own machines, right? And run your own application code. So this is very popular infrastructure as a service, and most companies usually start at this stage. Some companies decide, hey, I don't want to take care of the operating system either, or the database security, or they may have a mixed model in which they may go infrastructure service for most things, but there may be certain things that they may subscribe to. For example, the database, they may decide, hey, I don't want to build my own SQL server, it's quite expensive. Or I don't want to build my own Oracle server, or not only is it expensive, but sometimes they don't have the expertise, the number of DBAs, the database admins available to, configure it properly. So they may rely on the cloud provider to do this for them, and then they'll just provide the application code and install it there or make it available there. So this is platform as a service, PaaS, which is platform as a service. So here, as I mentioned, everything in here that is in orange will be the responsibility of the cloud provider. And here the blue is going to be your or our responsibility. Then there is SaaS, which is software as a service, in which case you have everything being done by the cloud provider, including the application code. So this is, you're just subscribing to a certain software that you need, and that's what you will subscribe to. So you don't need to take care about the application code at all, and they'll do everything for you. So these are the different choices you have to make, whether you're going to go infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, or software as a service. And most companies will start here. They may go and have some services in here, and probably get 1 or 2 softwares in here, right? So it depends on the company, of course, but generally most companies start here, and they may have a few services in here, and usually it'll be a mixed model, and they may also consider some services as software as a service. So then there is the last services that they offer is monitoring and management. So which includes CloudWatch, which is for monitoring and logging. Then there's the CloudTrail for API logging. There's the config for compliance and audit to make sure your configuration is consistent and compliant. And there is a trusted advisor recommendation as well. Now, as far as the AWS is concerned, they always will tell you that we have a very well architected framework, which is basically designed upon these 6 pillars, which is operational excellence, highly secure, very reliable, highly efficient in performance, is highly cost optimized as well, and it's sustainable. Now, as far as the AWS pricing model is concerned, you can go do pay as you go. There's a free tier option. I did mention that in my last lecture, that you can get $200 of free AWS usage. You can have reserved versus on demand. So you can go to on demand. On demand is slightly more expensive than versus reserved, or you can reserve the capacity, get a discount for reserving capacity ahead of time. And the whole idea is obviously to lower the total cost of ownership. In terms of use cases, you will find that AWS can be used in a variety of cases, right? Be it web hosting, could be backup and disaster recovery, big data analytics, machine learning and AI, and Internet of Things. In terms of companies, there's lots of companies that support hundreds, if basically I would say thousands of companies. And big ones, of course, are Netflix for global streaming, Airbnb, which is a very scalable platform they have, and NASA for data storage and analysis. In order to get started with AWS, you may want to consider creating a free AWS account to begin with. You'll get $200 for 6 months, as I mentioned in my previous lecture. You can explore the AWS console, try the free tier stuff available, and these AWS training resources that, of course, we'll go into AWS training more lectures here, but there's lots of information on their own website as well. In terms of training and certifications, the first AWS certification you may want to look at is the foundational course, which will basically take you towards the Cloud Practitioner designation. And then, of course, there are more designations as you move along. So thank you for watching, and I'm glad you could join us today. And I hope that you have a great day and a great week ahead of you, and hopefully you can join us once again. Take care. Bye-bye.